Okay, it's time to add a 3D shoe element. So let's head into our hero section and add another div, which we will call hero 3D shoe, and make sure that it as well is an absolute, taking up the whole space, and maybe Z index of 1. So above the background grid that we have and below the actual content. And inside it, we can go and bring in a spline element. So there is a native spline element within Webflow, and you can see that it's brought in here. And from the settings panel, it's basically needing some kind of a URL for the scene that we want to load. So here in Spline, I'm going to share with you this project, and we're going to head into exporting this project. Now, basically, what we need to copy is from the viewer tab, we need this line of code to copy it. So I'm copying this. I do want to show you that there is play settings here, which basically means what would happen when we embed this. What camera is being embedded? Do we want to include Spline logo? No, in this case. Do we want to include a background color? In this case, I want transparent background, so hide the background. Does it enable the page to scroll? There are all kinds of properties here. Like even we can do that, we can orbit the element or zoom in with our cursor, or basically if we can play around with this module. Now I'm turning these off because I want to show you how to use Webflow's native interaction to control these elements. And also we have another issue here, which is if I want to use these native spline interaction to orbit, pan, and zoom, basically that means that we're going to need this layer to be on top of everything else. And if I do that, then this button will not be accessible for me. But because we have texts and button that are going to be layered up on top of the spline elements, in any case, I won't be able to use them. So basically we are competing. The thing that is most at the top of the most high Z index is basically is the one that our cursor can interact with. So in this case, we want the cursor to be interacting with the button. So we're not going to use this, and we'll use Webflow's native interaction to play around with this animation. So I'm getting back into the overview, copying again the URL scene, and in Webflow, I'm going to paste this right here and reload Spline scene, and we've got it. And let's basically preview this. So we've got the shoe, and the shoe is loaded. It's not doing anything right now, but it is at least loaded in our scene. So now let's go ahead and you can actually see that the spline scene, maybe we'll set the spline scene. Let's call this hero spline element. Maybe I want to set the height into 100% just so that it's taking up the whole space that we have here. Yeah, I think it looks good. Okay, one thing to say, by the way, about spline elements, especially if you're bringing in heavy or intricate objects like we have right now, as you can see, sometimes it takes a second to load, which is why we're going to use a preloader in this website. So be mindful when you're using 3D elements. Don't bring in something that is too complicated, too heavy. It's just going to make loading speed a lot more slower. So just one thing to note. Okay, let's bring in an interaction or animation for this 3D shoe. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to select the hero section and add an interaction on top of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with mouse over an element. So while the mouse is moving over the whole hero section, I'll be able to animate something. So let's create a new animation. Let's call this spline mouse movement. Now, I can basically select the spline element here and add an interaction. So basically this is, I'm animating a property across the x-axis. Basically x is left and right, and y-axis is top to bottom. So let's start with left and right. I'm going to hit new one, and you can see here that from the integration, I have a spline integration right here. So I'm going to select the spline, and basically now I'm setting up the starting position. Basically means x0 is the top most left side of the screen. What would happen, and what would happen at 100%, the most right side of the screen. So let's go here. From the spline setting, we need to select an object, and we've basically got the sneaker mesh in here. And let's rotate it a little bit. So you can see I can play around with this Y rotation, and I can basically rotate it this way. So let's say that if the cursor is on the most left side of the screen, then it's going to turn this way. And then when it's going to be on the right side, let's select the mesh again. Let's turn it maybe around here. Okay, now let's preview this. Now you can see that as my cursor is going left, the shoe is turning left. And as my cursor is going right, the shoe is turning right. So it's basically following my cursor, which is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and also add, let's turn off the live preview here, and also add, I'm going to save this. I want to add the Y axis. I'm going to do the same. Just let's have it follow my mouse just a little bit. So Y0 is actually, I guess, the bottom of the screen. I think it's the bottom of the screen, and then So let's start with the bottom of the screen. Let's rotate it this way. And then let's do the same for 100%, which is the top. Let's rotate it top like this. Let's preview this. No, I got it wrong. Okay, so 0 is actually the bottom. So we can actually switch these around. So this can be the top and this can be the bottom. All right, let's go ahead. So now cursor is down, shoe is looking down, cursor is up, the shoe is looking up. And as you can see, the shoe is basically following my cursor around, which is a pretty fun and cool interaction. Let's go ahead and play around with that. So now the shoe is basically following my cursor. That's nice. That's one thing that we can do, and that was pretty easy. One more thing that I want to explore, let's actually remove this interaction and instead just add a page load. So when the page is loading, let's just trigger an animation. So page load, and after the page is loading, obviously, we don't want this. Yeah, we need the page to load first. Then start an animation, and let's call this rotate shoe. And in this case, I'm going to again select the spline element, and I'm going to add an animation to the spline. I'm going to select the mesh, and let's find how to rotate it. So let's play around with this Y, and I'm going to just click until I see almost a full circle. So yeah, I guess 6 is almost a full circle. Let me play this. Let's set the duration to 2 so it's not crazy fast. It's still pretty fast. Okay, so 6 is almost like a perfect circle. Let's turn this into 3. Okay, but if we want to, so now basically it's animating from 0 to -6. And if we want this to continuously looping, which is what I want, I need to immediately at the end of the animation bring it back to 0 so that it can reanimate into 6. So let's maybe duplicate this and bring it back to 0. So it's snapping a little bit. Maybe it should be 6.3 or something. Yeah, now the jump is almost seamless. So 6.3 and then maybe 6.2. I think maybe it's a little bit too much. And then, yeah, at least it will be jumping in the right direction to 5. Okay. And then this should be 0, duration of 0, meaning after it gets to animates into -6.25, immediately it jumps into 0 and it will be able to start a new animation. So let's save that now. Let's select loop here so that it's looping and preview this. Let's see, after one animation, immediately, seamlessly animating into the next one. Okay, I think this is a little bit too fast, but besides that, I do think that this is a pretty cool animation to run as we're loading. Maybe let's make it 5, save this, and preview. Yep, now I'm happy, and I can go ahead and preview this. And now we've got the shoe animating seamlessly. The background with the spline is also animating, looping in the background, and we've got a pretty cool hero section.